Alright, welcome back. This is Dr. Sharawi and I'll be talking about the liver today. Now, the liver is considered to be one of the largest organs within the body. Now, keep in mind that the largest organ within the body is the skin because it will take lots of surface area within the body. Okay, so what are the accessory organs for the GI or the gastrointestinal tract or the GIT? Now we have three different accessory organs. The first one will be the liver. Then we have the gallbladder, which is the green organ that we see over here. Then the last but not least will be the pancreas. Okay, so I'll be speaking briefly about the scope of the liver itself. As we see, that's kind of hidden right here within the right hypochondrium, and it will consume portions of the epigastric area. In other words, if we have a disease or a hepatomegaly, which is enlargement of the liver, it will proceed downwards. In other words, it will kind of consume within the lower portion of the right hypochondrium, and actually that's where the physician will be palpating through here, and they will kind of detect it underneath the ribs. Eventually, how do they kind of assess it? They would go, okay, so it's 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger enlargement, and they will state the location for it. And definitely an ultrasound would help confirm the diagnosis, and definitely we'll do lots and lots of lab work to find out about the enzymes, which is similar to the AST, or which is the aspartate transaminase, and the ALT, which is the alanine transaminase, and definitely the different bile levels and the bilirubin as well. Now, okay, let's go ahead and go back within the scope of the liver. Now, again, this is the location of the liver. It's present just underneath the diaphragm muscle. Now, the diaphragm muscle, again, is the main muscle of respiration and is being supplied by the phrenic nerve, C3 to C5. Keep that in mind, because if there is an injury to that nerve, what would happen? Unfortunately, we will not be able to breathe, and we will have the respiratory collapse, unless if we're being placed on a ventilator, God forbid. Okay, so let's go ahead and take another look, or a different view about the liver right here without the diaphragm muscle. So this is the liver over here is being separated by the superior surface by a ligament. It's called the falciform ligament, and eventually subdivided into a right lobe and a left lobe. Now we have a different organ that's lying or embedded underneath the diaphragm, underneath the liver, and that organ is called the gallbladder. It's a pear-shaped organ. Now we have a different system, and I'll speak about it in a few minutes as well. Okay, so let me just kind of bring the liver as a separate entity, and we could kind of go through and go over it briefly. Now, if you look into a liver, again, we agreed that this is the right lobe of the liver, that's the left lobe of the liver, that's the falciform ligament. Now, from the superior surface right here is covered by the diaphragm muscle, and through the diaphragm muscle we would have the inferior vena cava. Now, if we would flip it or look at the inferior surface right there, we would have 2 more lobes. We have something called the caudate lobe, which is C-A-U-D-A-T-E. And we have the quadrate. Look over here, it looks like a quad, a rectangle, 4 angles, quadrate lobe. And keep in mind, this is a very good question. Both the caudate lobe and the quadrate lobe, both of them will lie within the right lobe of the liver, not the left lobe of the liver. If you're really confused about it, look at the bulkier portion. If you're confused, you could actually flip it through and decide which is right and which is left. This is usually right, which is the more bulkier portion, versus the left, which is the less bulkier portion. Okay, so let me go ahead and flip through and look further into the inferior surface. Now this is a flip liver. Again, this is the inferior vena cava. And if we look over here, that this is the gallbladder. It is a pear-shaped organ. Now, the main components of the gallbladder, which will be the fundus. Then we will have the body of the gallbladder. Then we have the cystic duct right there. Okay. And we have the correlation or the opening along within the common hepatic duct right here. Now, one of the main functions and the critical functions of the liver is that it would create bile, which is called the bile salts. What is the main function of bile? Is that it would kind of emulsify and break down fat product and from food that we eat over here. So if we are engulfed in different food we're eating, go through the oral cavity, then you pass it through the pharynx right there, all the way down into the esophagus, opening up into the gastroesophageal sphincter right there, all the way into the stomach. All right. Then from the stomach it will pass within the pyloric sphincter, along within the first part of the duodenum, second part of the duodenum, and that's where the opening of the ampulla of Vater. Now if we would just back up a little bit here, let's go a little bit inferior, and again this is the fundus of the gallbladder, that's the body of the gallbladder, that's the neck. Then we have the cystic duct, and eventually the cystic duct would open up into along with the common hepatic ducts, and they would form the common bile duct, and eventually the common bile duct will pass through and open up into the second part of the duodenum. Now, how is this, or how the contractility or the contractile function of the gallbladder would take place? Initially, we would have something called the cholecystokinin, the CCK. Basically, this is something that's being released that would allow contractility of the gallbladder. Now, what is the main function of the gallbladder? It is to receive bile salt from being formed within the liver, right and left lobes of the liver, and eventually this bile salt will pass into the gallbladder to be stored and concentrated. So eventually it will be kind of a concentrated, it's a pure bile, and eventually once it's being concentrated and once it's being exposed to the cholecystokinin as a reflex mechanism from the food entering into the second part of the duodenum, which is basically lipids and fats, eventually what would happen is that that's where the bile salts would be released to emulsify and break down the lipids that we eat and help along definitely within the digestion. Okay, now let's back up a little bit here. Now we spoke about the right and left hepatic ducts. So how do we track it down again? As our rule indicates, this is the bulkier lobe of the liver, and if we have something coming out of the right lobe of the liver, then this is the right hepatic duct. If it's coming off from the left hepatic region, then we will call the left hepatic duct, and eventually both the right and the left hepatic ducts coming along to form something called the common hepatic duct. Eventually the common hepatic duct would join the cystic duct right here and form something called the common bile duct that would descend right there. So this is the formation right here. So that's the, again, that's the cystic duct, that's the common hepatic duct, that's the right hepatic duct, that's the left hepatic duct, and they will come in together, the common hepatic duct with the cystic duct, to form the common bile duct, descending, and eventually they will come from the posterior aspect of the duodenum, and eventually this is just a cut section through the pancreas, and they would open up into the ampulla of Vater. Now keep in mind, what is the white thing extending throughout the pancreas? This is a pancreas. This is called the pancreatic duct. Now the pancreas is considered to be one of the endocrine and the exocrine glandular organs, so it would help within the enzymes being produced within the digestive process that would help with the digestion, and again it would help as within the endocrine system, and that's where the alpha cells, the beta cells would definitely produce the insulin, while the alpha cells will be producing the glucagon in order to increase the blood glucose level. All right, well, hopefully you guys kind of gained some information. And one last thing before we go is that definitely we have, this is considered to be the bare area of the liver, and it's covered, or it would underlie the diaphragm muscle again, which is the main muscle of respiration right there. Okay, well, looking forward to see you guys in the future videos, and thank you very much. Please like our page if you do like it. Thank you.